The first thing people always ask me is how it felt when the handcuffs clicked shut, and I tell them the same thing every time. It wasn't fear, not really. It was that quiet, sinking realization that I'd just become someone else's lesson, you know what I mean? One second I was standing in my own front yard with dirt under my fingernails thinking about absolutely nothing important. And the next a cop was yanking my arms behind my back like I'd personally offended him just by existing. And in that moment, I knew exactly how this was going to go, unless I let it play out. Yeah, that happened. It was a Tuesday morning late fall. One of those mornings where everything looks fake perfect. The sky too blue. The lawns trimmed so evenly they look like carpet, the kind of neighborhood where people wave but keep score in their heads. Cedar Crest. That kind of place. I'd just moved in quietly through a trust through lawyers the way you do when your job teaches you early that privacy isn't optional. It's survival. I wasn't wearing anything special, just old sweatpants and a hoodie from a unit I'd commanded years ago, gardening gloves that had seen better days, hair pulled back without a mirror. I'd been overseas a long time, and that morning pulling weeds out of my own flower bed felt like therapy, like proof that I was home and still human. Then I heard that voice from the sidewalk, sweet in that way that isn't sweet at all. You missed a spot. I finished what I was doing before I looked up, because when you've spent your life being sized up, you learn not to jump on command. The woman standing there had a little designer dog, and that look people get when they think they belong somewhere more than you do. She pointed at my flowers, talked about curb appeal, about rules, about how we don't usually let things slide around here. I told her I'd just moved in, said I was getting to it. Her eyes ran over me, hoodie, gloves, dirt, and then she asked it the question she'd been waiting to ask. So are you the owner, or are you the help? I've heard that question in 100 different forms my whole life, in boardrooms, in briefing rooms, in places where the assumption always comes before the introduction. I could have ended it right there, could have said my title, my rank, my resume, but I didn't. I just said, I'm the owner. Have a nice walk. Then I turned back to my flowers. I didn't insult her. I didn't raise my voice. I just dismissed her, and in Cedar Crest, that's apparently unforgivable. She walked away stiff and offended, and I honestly thought that was the end of it. I went back to gardening, breathing easier, letting the quiet settle back in. About 20 minutes later, tires crunched slowly on gravel behind me. I didn't even turn around at first because part of me already knew. The car didn't pass. It stopped. A voice called out, "Step away from the property, ma'am." I stood up slowly, hands visible without thinking about it. 2 officers got out. One was young, nervous, still new enough that his uniform looked like it had never been wrinkled. The other one, Sergeant Dale Rourke, filled the space like he was used to doing that. Big guy hand near his holster boots, straight onto my lawn, crushing the flowers I'd just planted like they were nothing. He said they'd gotten a call about a suspicious individual, possible break-in. I told him I lived there. I said I was gardening. He looked at the house behind me, then back at me like the math didn't add up. He said the property was worth over $1 million like that alone, proved I was lying. I said the market was crazy, and I saw it right then, the shift. He didn't like that I wasn't scared, didn't like my tone, didn't like that I met his eyes and didn't shrink. He demanded my ID. I told him it was inside on the kitchen counter. He snapped at me to stay where I was, said I could grab a weapon. The younger officer shifted and quietly suggested maybe we just let me get it. Rourke shut him down without even looking at him. Told me I was acting erratic. I told him I was standing perfectly still and that he was escalating. That's when it stopped being about identification. That's when it became about power. He pulled out his cuffs and told me to put my hands behind my back. I asked if I was under arrest for what crime. He listed trespassing, obstruction, resisting, all on my own property. Then he lunged, grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise, twisted my wrists behind me, snapped the cuffs on too tight. And here's the part people love to argue about later, the part they say they would have done differently. I didn't fight him. Not because I couldn't. Because I knew exactly what would happen if I did. I knew how fast this would turn into a different story, how quickly cameras would miss things, how easily force would be justified. So I let him do it. Every rough shove, every unnecessary movement, every second of humiliation, I let it happen. Evidence is a funny thing. Sometimes you have to let people create it themselves. He shoved me into the back of the cruiser, pushed my head down hard like he wanted me to feel small, slammed the door, and I just sat there, breathing steady, eyes half closed, because while he thought he'd won, my phone was still in my pocket, my location still pinging systems, already noticing that something was wrong. By the time we pulled away, the clock had started. The station looked like it hadn't changed since the 70s. Buzzing lights, stale air, the kind of place where time goes to die. Rourke dragged me in and told the desk sergeant to book me. Trespass resisting failure to ID. The desk sergeant Mills looked at me and hesitated. He asked if I'd actually resisted. Rourke said I talked back. Mills sighed and said talking back wasn't a crime. Rourke slammed his hand on the counter and demanded loyalty. I calmly explained that my ID was inside my house and that I'd been arrested for being on my own property. Mills asked which property. I gave him the address. Rourke scoffed and said the house had been empty for months. I told him then he'd missed the moving trucks, or maybe he hadn't liked what he saw. Mills told me I was entitled to a phone call. Rourke tried to block it. Mills stood his ground just enough to cover himself. They walked me to an old wall phone, grimy receiver, Rourke hovering behind me like he was waiting for a punchline. I dialed a number from memory, a number you don't write down, a number you only learn when your job comes with consequences most people never see. The line rang once. Someone answered. I identified myself, gave my authentication code, said I was being unlawfully detained and needed immediate extraction and a federal response. I could feel Rourke's smirk burning into my back. On the other end, the voice shifted from professional to alarmed. They asked if I was in danger. I said I wasn't injured but needed it handled now, and I requested an integrity audit on the precinct effective immediately. That wasn't casual language. That was a trigger. They told me extraction was moving ETA 12 minutes, FBI notified. I hung up slowly and turned around. Rourke laughed in my face. Said it was a nice try, said I'd been watching too many movies. I didn't argue. I just told him that in about 11 minutes he was going to hear helicopters. He called me crazy. The younger officer swallowed hard and suggested maybe we check my story. Rourke threatened him with traffic duty. Mills started typing. His face changed as he read the screen. He said the property was owned by the trust, that there was a federal exemption code attached. Rourke didn't want to hear it. He told me to shut up. Then the room went quiet. Not dramatic quiet, just that moment when everyone hears the same thing at once. Rotor blades. Faint at first, then unmistakable. The younger officer ran to the window and whispered that there were helicopters and SUVs, a lot of them. Rourke froze. The doors opened hard and people in tactical vests moved in like they owned the place because they did. An FBI agent stepped forward and took control of the room. He came straight to me, addressed me by rank, asked if I was injured. I showed him my wrists. He turned to Rourke and told him to turn around. Rourke stammered, said he was doing his job. The agent told him he'd assaulted a federal official, unlawfully detained a citizen, violated civil rights. He cuffed him with the same metal sound that had started this whole thing. Rourke looked at me, then really looked and whispered that he didn't know. I told him he didn't care. The younger officer was shaking. The agent told him they'd review the body cam, put him on leave. Mills apologized. I told him he'd asked the right questions. Outside, the neighborhood had gathered, drawn by the noise and the spectacle. I saw the woman with the dog, pale and silent, watching what she'd set in motion. The agent asked if I wanted her brought in. I said no. She wasn't the fire, just the smoke. Let her live with it. The footage came out. People argued. Some said the cop was just being careful. Others said it was exactly what it looked like. When my identity became public, the conversation shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't just about a woman in a hoodie. It was about how easily power gets abused when the person on the receiving end doesn't look important enough. The investigation widened. Rourke's history surfaced. Complaints buried, patterns ignored. The department wasn't clean. Neither was the town. People went to court. Sentences were handed down. Rourke got years in federal prison. Others followed. People celebrated, said justice had been served. 3 months later, I was back in my yard replanting what had been crushed. The neighborhood was quieter, more careful. Then my secure phone rang.